The house always smelled like wet wool and Jim Beam. A gray box at the end of a dirt road that flooded every spring, sinking us into mud and silence. Inside, the walls were bare, nails stuck out of the hallway plaster like they were waiting for something that never came. In the bathroom, there was a single toothbrush in a cup and a bar of gritty soap that smelled like pumice stone. It was just me and my father. He was a big man, broad shoulders, heavy steps. He worked at the lumber yard. Every day at 5:30 he came home with sawdust caught in his eyebrows. We had a routine. He washed his hands in the kitchen sink until the skin turned red. Then he heated dinner, usually canned chili or hot dogs boiled in water. We ate standing at the counter. "How was school?" he asked. "Normal. Learn anything?" "Math. Good." That was it, that tiny window of time when he was actually my father. At 6:30, he set his plate in the sink. He reached into the cabinet above the fridge and pulled down the square bottle, then a glass. He sat at the small kitchen table pressed against the wall. He always dragged the chair so he wouldn't face the living room. He preferred the window. Our backyard was nothing but waist-high weeds and a rusted swing I wasn't allowed to touch. Along the back fence, wild rose bushes tangled into a wall of thorns. He sat there, staring at those roses, pouring whiskey like it was medicine. By the second glass, the air in the house got heavy. He didn't yell right away. First he went still. He stared through the window, tapping his finger on the table in a steady rhythm. I knew that rhythm. It meant I needed to disappear. I took my toy cars to the living room. I learned to roll them on the carpet because the wooden floor made too much noise. Noise made him explode. "Quiet," he growled without turning around. So I played silently. I built towers out of magazines and knocked them over in slow motion so they wouldn't make a sound. Fear is mostly boredom. You sit with your knees pulled to your chest, waiting for the adult to pass out so you can go to the bathroom without getting yelled at. I had no one to talk to, no siblings, no friends allowed over because the house is a mess, even though the house was practically empty. Maybe that's why I didn't panic when I saw the shadow. It was a Tuesday. It had been raining for 3 days. The roof was leaking into a bucket in the bathroom, dripping in a slow, maddening rhythm. My father was on his third glass, mumbling at the window. I was behind the couch when I looked toward the hallway. Something was standing in the doorway. It was huge, so tall it had to hunch its shoulders to fit. It wore a long brown garment that looked stiff like dried mud. It took one step. The fabric creaked like something brittle being pulled apart. I pressed my back against the couch and held my breath. The thing stepped into the living room light. Its face was a deep, swollen purple, shiny like stretched rubber. No eyes, just two swollen slits. No nose. Its mouth hung open, crooked, pulled to the left. It breathed with a wet, bubbling rasp. I waited for it to grab me. It didn't. It just stood there, swaying gently. Then it turned its head toward the kitchen. My father was 3 meters away, staring at the window, swirling his drink. "Dad," I whispered. He didn't hear me. But the thing did. Its head twisted toward me with a slow, grinding sound. I squeezed my eyes shut. I heard the stiff fabric dragging across the floor. I smelled damp earth and old metal. Then something cold touched my hair. It stroked my head, awkward, almost curious. I opened one eye. The thing was kneeling in front of me, its swollen face inches from mine. A thin line of drool hung from its crooked mouth. It stroked my head again. My father coughed in the kitchen. The creature straightened itself, unfolding upward like a spider rising from its web, and slipped back into the dark hallway. I touched my hair. It was still cold where it had brushed me. It came back the next night. In the night after that, I started calling it Mr. Purple Face. He usually appeared around 7:00 p.m., right when my father was sinking deep into the bottle. Mr. Purple Face stood in the corner near the TV, motionless, watching. It didn't take me long to realize my father couldn't see him. My father walked right past him on the way to the bathroom. He shivered, rubbed his arms, muttered something about a draft, but he never looked up. Mr. Purple Face became my secret. And eventually, I started talking to him. "This is my red truck," I whispered, holding it up. Mr. Purple Face leaned forward, making that soft clicking sound deep in his throat, like something trying to remember how to breathe. One night, my father was in bad shape. He had lost his keys and was tearing the living room apart, throwing cushions, knocking over magazines, kicking at the carpet. "Where are they?" he shouted. He pointed at me with a shaking hand. "You took them." "I didn't," I said. "Don't lie to me." He stepped toward me, his face was flushed, twisted with anger. He raised his hand. I curled into myself. And then Mr. Purple Face moved. He stepped out of the corner fast, faster than anything that size should move, and placed himself directly between me and my father. He spread his arms wide, blocking me completely. My father froze. He blinked. He looked straight at the creature's chest, though he didn't seem to understand what he was seeing. "Jesus," he muttered. He rubbed his face. "It's freezing in here." He turned away, stumbling back toward the kitchen, mumbling to himself. Mr. Purple Face turned to me. He knelt. He stroked my head again, that same strange, clumsy motion. And he stayed there the entire night, standing guard beside the couch. For 2 years, that was my life. Me, my father, and the guardian in the hallway. But when I turned 7, everything changed. The rain started and didn't stop. The backyard turned into a swamp. And my father stopped going to work. When he stopped working, the house changed. It felt smaller, like the walls were inching inward day by day. Before, I had the mornings to myself. I had the time between getting off the school bus and him coming home, time to watch TV, eat snacks, pretend I was a normal kid. But after he lost his job, those hours disappeared. He said he was fired because his supervisor was an idiot who couldn't tell good lumber from scrap. But even at 7, I knew that wasn't true. I knew he got fired because he smelled like whiskey before noon. He didn't leave the house anymore. He moved his entire life to the kitchen table. He stopped eating. Every morning, I walked into the kitchen and the can of chili I had opened the night before was still sitting on the counter. The sauce had dried into a dark crust. He only drank. And he watched the backyard. It was November when the rain began. Not a storm, just a constant gray drizzle that never stopped. The dirt road turned to mud. The yard, already overgrown, began to look like a swamp. Water pooled around the rusted swing. The weeds turned black and slimy. My father became obsessed with it. He pressed his forehead to the cold window, fogging the glass with his breath. "Look at that," he muttered. "Just look at this mess." I stood in the doorway, holding my cereal bowl. "Look at what?" "The mud," he said. "It's taking everything. It's going to swallow the fence." He turned to look at me. His eyes were bloodshot. He hadn't shaved in a week. His skin looked gray, like the house was draining the color out of him. "Don't go outside," he said. "I won't," I said. "It's raining." "I'm serious." He gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles were white. "I don't want you bringing that filth into this house. If I see you near that mud, I'll beat you." He wasn't yelling. He said it quietly, almost gently, like he was giving me advice. That was worse than yelling. A quiet threat always sinks deeper. I backed away and returned to the living room. Mr. Purple Face was there. And he had changed too. In the beginning, he was calm, just a statue in the corner, a silent watcher. But now that my father was home all day, something in him had shifted. He was restless. He no longer stayed in the living room. He paced the hallway, dragging that stiff brown garment across the carpet, back and forth, like he was wearing a path into the floor. Sometimes he stopped at the edge of the kitchen, stood there for a minute, then turned around again. He seemed agitated, almost anxious. The wet, bubbling sound in his throat had grown louder. It reminded me of water boiling in a pot, thick, heavy, struggling to rise. He started spending more time near the kitchen doorway, always just out of my father's line of sight. He pressed his swollen purple head against the doorframe and watched my father drink. Sometimes he lifted one gray hand and reached toward him. He never touched him. He just held his hand there, suspended in the air, like he was trying to grasp something he couldn't quite reach. I tried to ignore it. I tried to play with my toy cars. But the air in the house felt too tight, stretched like a rubber band pulled to its limit. Every sound felt sharp, every silence felt dangerous. On Thursday, the power went out. It was noon, but the sky was so dark it looked like night. The rain was falling harder now. I could hear it hammering the roof like fists. My father didn't move when the lights went out. He just kept staring into the backyard. "It never stops," he whispered. "Why won't it stop?" He stood up, the chair scraped across the floor. He walked to the back door and opened it. Wind shoved the rain into the kitchen. It soaked the front of his shirt instantly, but he didn't seem to notice. He stood there gripping the doorframe, staring at the wild rose bushes. "Hey," he shouted. It was the first time I'd ever heard him yell at the yard. "This is my property," he screamed. "Get off my property." I was hiding behind the couch. I peeked through the window. There was no one outside. Just rain and weeds and mud swallowing the ground. "I see you," my father shouted at the empty yard. "You think I don't see you? I know what you're doing." Mr. Purple Face stepped out of the hallway. He moved past me without looking at me, fast, purposeful. He entered the kitchen. The gray light from the open door hit him. His skin looked wet, slick. His swollen purple face glistened like oil. He walked right up to my father so close his chest nearly touched my father's back. My father kept yelling into the rain. "Get away, leave it alone." Mr. Purple Face leaned in. He brought his face close to my father's ear. I thought he was going to bite him. I thought he was going to tear out his throat. I thought everything was finally going to break. But he didn't. He didn't attack. He didn't scream. He simply opened his mouth. The crooked jaw hung loose, unhinged, as if it no longer belonged to him. Then he breathed in right beside my father's ear, a wet, rattling hiss loud enough to cut through the storm outside. My father froze. He stopped yelling mid-word. His whole body went rigid. He slapped a hand over his ear as if a bug had crawled inside it. Slowly, he turned around. Mr. Purple Face stood there, towering over him. But my father didn't see him. He stared straight through the creature, eyes wide, darting around the kitchen like he was searching for someone hiding in the shadows. "Who's there?" he whispered. "Who did that?" Mr. Purple Face didn't move. He just watched my father with those swollen, sealed-shut eyes, as if he could see something deeper than sight. My father backed up until he hit the counter. His breathing was ragged. He looked terrified, truly terrified in a way I had never seen before. "Is someone in here?" he shouted, voice cracking. "I'll call the police, I have a gun." He didn't have a gun. He grabbed the whiskey bottle from the table and held it like a club, knuckles white, arm shaking. "Show yourself," he screamed. Mr. Purple Face leaned forward again. He extended one long, gray finger and tapped my father's chest. Just a single touch. My father gasped. He looked down at his shirt, then pressed his hand to the spot where the finger had touched him. "Cold," he whimpered. "It's so cold." Then he ran. Not toward the creature, through it. He bolted out of the kitchen, down the hallway, and into his bedroom. The door slammed so hard the frames on the wall rattled. I heard the lock click. And then it was just me. Mr. Purple Face turned toward me. He didn't look frightening anymore. He looked sad. He walked over to where I was hiding and collapsed onto the floor beside me. The stiff brown fabric of his clothing creaked as he sank down. He reached out and took my hand. His fingers were freezing. We stayed like that for a long time, listening to the rain and the muffled sound of my father crying behind his locked door. That weekend felt endless. My father didn't come out of his room for an entire day. I ate peanut butter straight from the jar with a spoon. When he finally emerged, he looked worse, sunken eyes, trembling hands. He didn't speak to me, he didn't even look at me. He went straight to the kitchen, opened a new bottle, and resumed his vigil at the window. The rain didn't stop. It just kept falling. The backyard had become a lake, brown, murky water swallowing the weeds. By Monday night, I woke up to silence. The rain had softened into a thin drizzle, but there was a sound coming from the living room. A scratching. I slipped out of bed and crept to the doorway. Mr. Purple Face was standing at the back door. My father had finally passed out, slumped over the table, snoring into his arms. Mr. Purple Face stood beside him, but he wasn't looking at my father. He was looking at the door. He was scratching the wood with his gray nails. He wanted to go outside. I stepped into the kitchen, staying close to the wall so I wouldn't wake my father. "Mr. Purple Face," I whispered. He stopped scratching. He turned his swollen head toward me. He pointed at the door. Then at the lock. He wanted me to open it. I shook my head. "Dad said no," I whispered. "Dad said I can't go near the mud." Mr. Purple Face tilted his head. He made a soft sound, not the wet hiss but something gentler, almost a whine. He pointed at the door again. Then he pointed toward the rose bushes in the dark yard. Just pointed. His gray finger rested against the glass. I looked outside. I couldn't see anything. Just black shapes and rain. Is something out there? I asked. Mr. Purple Face didn't answer. He just stared into the yard, unmoving. He stayed like that for a long time, then he lowered his hand. He looked defeated. He turned back to the window and watched the darkness. I went back to bed. The next day was Tuesday. The day everything ended. Tuesday night was when it all came apart. It was raining hard that night. The sound hammered the roof so loudly it drowned out the TV. I went to bed early because my father was in one of his moods. He had been packing the kitchen for hours, muttering to himself, finishing one bottle and starting another. I pulled the pillow over my head, but I could still hear his heavy footsteps shaking the floorboards. Eventually, exhaustion won and I drifted off. I woke up when my bedroom door slammed open. The hallway light was on. My father stood in the doorway, filling it like a shadow. His shirt was unbuttoned and stained with sweat. He held the neck of the whiskey bottle in his right hand, gripping it like a weapon. "Get up," he said. His voice was thick, slurred. He was drunker than I had ever seen him. I sat up trembling. "What?" "Get up," he shouted. "Stop hiding in here." He stormed into the room. He grabbed my arm hard, his grip burned. He yanked me out of bed. "Dad, you're hurting me," I cried. "Shut up," he spat. "I'm sick of you sneaking around. I'm sick of you looking at me like that." He dragged me down the hallway. I tried to dig my heels into the carpet, but he was too strong. He pulled me into the kitchen. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The back door was cracked open, letting cold rain blow inside. He shoved me into the corner. I slipped on the linoleum and hit my knees hard. "Please," I whispered. He didn't hear me. Or he didn't care. He was breathing heavily, face twisted with rage. He looked at me with pure hatred. It wasn't about the rain, it wasn't about the yard, he just needed something to break. "I give you a roof," he shouted, "and you just sit there, you judge me." He raised the bottle. Held it like a club. He stepped toward me, pulling his arm back to swing. I curled into a ball on the floor. I squeezed my eyes shut and covered my head with my hands. I waited for the bottle to hit me. But it didn't. The air in the kitchen shifted. It smelled like wet earth. I opened my eyes. Mr. Purple Face was standing over me. He had stepped out of the shadows, placing himself between me and my father. He faced my father directly. Under the harsh kitchen lights, he looked enormous. His brown garment was stiff and soaked. Mud dripped from the hem onto the clean floor. His arms were spread wide. He was shielding me. My father froze mid-swing. He blinked. He stared at the space in front of him. At first he looked confused, squinting like he couldn't focus on what was standing there, then his eyes widened. He dropped the bottle. It shattered on the floor, whiskey splashed across his boots. He stepped back. His mouth opened but no sound came out. "You," he whispered. He stared at the swollen purple face. At the flattened nose. At the crooked jaw hanging loose. My father made a sound I had never heard before, high-pitched, sharp, almost animal. "No," he said. He lifted his hands in front of his face. "No, stay back." Mr. Purple Face stepped forward. He leaned in. He brought his face inches from my father's. My father screamed. It was a scream of pure terror. He scrambled backward, slipping in the spilled whiskey, falling hard. He crab-walked into the corner near the stove. "Get away," he shrieked, his legs kicked wildly. "Don't touch me, stay away from me." Mr. Purple Face didn't move toward him. He just stood there, blocking me with his body. My father curled into a ball, covering his head with his arms. He was sobbing, shaking, babbling about stones and dirt. "I put you back," he screamed. "I put you back." I stayed on the floor behind Mr. Purple Face. I didn't move. Then I saw blue lights flashing across the window. The neighbors must have heard the screaming. A moment later, the front door crashed open. "Police, police." Two officers ran into the kitchen with their guns drawn. They saw my father in the corner screaming at empty air. They saw the shattered bottle. They saw me on the floor crying. But they didn't see Mr. Purple Face. "Drop the weapon," one officer shouted, even though my father wasn't holding anything. My father didn't hear him, he was pointing at Mr. Purple Face. "She's right there," my father screamed. "She's right there, don't let her touch me." The officers tackled him, pinned him to the floor, handcuffed him while he thrashed and kicked. He kept screaming. She came back, the rain washed her out. A female officer came to me, she lifted me gently and carried me out of the kitchen. As we walked down the hallway, I looked over her shoulder. Mr. Purple Face was still in the kitchen, watching them take my father away. He raised one gray hand and waved at me. Then he stepped back into the shadows. I sat in the back of a police car wrapped in a blanket. I watched them load my father into another car. I thought he was going to jail for trying to hit me. I thought he was going to jail for being drunk. I didn't know the real reason. Not then. Social services took me that night. A few days later, my grandparents came to get me, my mother's parents. I hadn't seen them since I was a baby. They took me to their home 3 towns over. It was quiet there. Safe. I never went back to the house at the end of the dirt road. I lived with my grandparents until I turned 18. They were good people. They lived in a brick house with a golden retriever and a backyard with a pool, no weeds, no roses. They never talked about my father. They never talked about that house. I went to therapy for a few years. The psychologist told me I had an active imagination. She said Mr. Purple Face was a coping mechanism, a protector I invented because my father was frightening and I was alone. It made sense. I wanted it to be true. So I believed her. I grew up, went to college, got a job in it, tried to be normal. I didn't think about the house for a long time. Then last week my phone rang. It was a state attorney. He told me my father was dead. He died in the infirmary of the state prison. His liver finally gave out. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel happy. I felt nothing. Like hearing about a stranger dying on the news. The attorney said there were no assets. The house had been repossessed 20 years ago, no money, nothing left. But, he said, there is a box of personal belongings. He listed you as next of kin. Do you want it or should we dispose of it? I almost told him to throw it away. I wanted to say that. Send it, I said instead. I don't know why. Maybe I needed proof he was really gone. The box arrived yesterday. A small cardboard box sealed with heavy tape. I set it on my kitchen table and stared at it for an hour before picking up a knife. I cut the tape. It smelled like him. Even after 20 years, old tobacco and mildew. Mostly junk. A cheap watch. A lighter. A stack of letters he wrote to me but never mailed. I didn't read them. At the bottom of the box, there was a brown envelope. I opened it. Inside was a stack of old Polaroids. The edges were curled, the colors faded into that strange orange tint old film gets when time has eaten through it. I flipped through them slowly. There was a photo of a truck I didn't recognize. A photo of the lumber yard. A photo of me as a baby, sitting on a blanket in the grass. And then I found it. The last photo in the stack. It had been taken in the kitchen, the old kitchen with the yellowed linoleum and the buzzing fluorescent lights. My father sat at the table. He looked younger, not yet swollen from years of drinking. He was smiling at the camera, holding a beer. Standing beside him, her arm draped around his shoulder, was a woman. My mother. I had never seen a picture of her before. My grandparents never kept any around. She was small, with dark hair and a shy smile. She looked happy, peaceful even. But I stopped breathing when I saw what she was wearing. A robe. A long, quilted brown robe that reached her ankles. In the photo it looked soft, warm, harmless. But I knew that robe. I remembered the sound it made scraping against the wall. I remembered how it dragged across the carpet. I remembered how stiff it was, caked with dried mud from the backyard. I leaned closer. I looked at the collar. There was a pattern, tiny stitched diamonds. My hand started to shake. I remembered that pattern. I used to stare at it for hours while hiding behind the couch, praying for my father to pass out. I looked at her face. Smooth. Perfect. A small nose. Bright eyes. A straight, gentle smile. I closed my eyes. Suddenly I was back in that living room. I could smell the wet earth. I could hear the bubbling, wheezing breath. I could see the swollen purple skin, the flattened nose, the crooked jaw hanging loose. I remembered how she stood between me and him. How she opened her arms to block him. How she shielded me with her whole body. I set the photo on the table. For 20 years I thought she left me. My father said she ran away. Said she didn't want a family. Said she abandoned us. But she didn't run. She never left. She was there the whole time, standing in the hallway watching him. Waiting for the rain to wash the dirt away so she could come back inside. She never left me. Not once. And as I stared at that photo, the room around me felt suddenly colder, like someone had opened a door behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life I understood the truth. She had been protecting me all along. And she still was.